In our last session, we talked about what your first month teaching ESL online could actually look like. Well, I wanted to be really honest and share what my first month teaching ESL online was like, the good, the awkward, and what surprised me, and help share the lessons that I learned to take forward throughout my ESL teaching career so that it helps you have a better teaching experience, learning from the mistakes that I made. Hi friends, my name's Catherine. I'm from the OET. I help people, especially mums, find work as an online ESL teacher so that they can work from home around their families. Now, in today's session, we are talking about all the lessons I learned through my first month teaching ESL online. What happened when I first started teaching, what things I did, what the lessons looked like, and what I could have improved if I was to do it all over again. Now, just to preface and be honest, my teaching journey started a very long time ago in 2017. So the company that I worked with then no longer exists. It's not in service anymore. So you can't apply to the same companies, but the lessons that I'm going to talk about can apply to whatever company you are looking to work for today. Now, when I was working with this company, the classes were 1-to-1 and 25 minutes long. And that can sound like a long time when you're just getting started, but we'll talk about that a bit later. They actually went really, really quickly, but we'll get into that in a bit. Now, with this company, we started just like as we talked about in the last session. We were doing our onboarding, training, signing the contract, and learning how to use the platform. And the platform was pretty easy to get through. You'd had your login, and you would have like your calendar, your timetable, and you'd be able to click and access the lesson materials as a preview. And then there was a button to click to start the class as well. And then inside the actual classroom, because they didn't use Zoom, they had their own platform that they used for the company. And you would have the videos on the left of yourself and your students. You'd have a big part of your screen would be the lesson materials. And then there was a timer at the top as well. And then you'd also have controls like turning the student's camera on and off, your own camera, turning the microphone on and off, and your own, and things like that. And then you'd have a toolbar at the bottom. So pretty standard things. So you'd have the mouse clicker, you'd have a drawing tool, you might have some shapes and a highlighter. So pretty standardized online teaching classroom. You usually find these resources in any company that you work with. Even if they're using Zoom, the layout is pretty similar. It's very generic. So it was just a case of learn how to use the platform, preview some lesson materials, and start with your first lesson. Now, with this company, as companies do vary, if I remember correctly, the parents didn't actually choose the teachers. So although you had like your teacher profile with your picture and a little bit about yourself, maybe even an intro video so that people could watch your video, I don't believe that the parents actually chose the teacher. Towards the end of my teaching career with companies, I was working with a company that the parents did make a choice. So the video was actually really important, and you'd have your profile of what degree you had, what qualifications in teaching, your experience, and yada, 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 and so on. So that was really important to have all of those resources available and professional, because parents are choosing you compared to the other teachers with the company. So it was really important to stand out. At that time, I don't remember spending time on a video and things, so I don't believe the parents actually chose. It was the company that booked the classes for you, just based on the schedule of what you had to offer. When it came to the bookings, it was slow to start off with. I wasn't starting at the start of a school year. I believe I signed the contract in the December, and I was doing my onboarding, and then I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks until I actually taught my first class. As I said, it was really long. It's a really long time ago now. Like, what's that, 9 years? So it's a lot to remember. But yeah, I believe it was about 3 weeks until I started my first classes in the January. So it wasn't the start of the school year. And if you're familiar with China, because that's the company that I was working for at the time, students based in China, they were children aged from anywhere from like babies to 16, although the advertised age was like 4 or 5 to 16. But I definitely taught babies at the same time as well. Anyway, so in China, between January and February, students have a month off for the winter holidays, and they celebrate Spring Festival or Lunar New Year. It's a huge celebration. So a lot of students actually take time off because they go traveling with their families, going back to their hometown. So classes were less available. So in the January, I did only have a few classes. It wasn't very quick. So if you start in maybe September, when school years start again, or end of August, September time, then you might have a quicker time period to fill out your schedule. So I started, as I said in the last session, that the company booked me with trial classes. The thing is, there's only so many trial classes, and it became super boring real quick. I was teaching the same trial class. I remember it was fruit. It's like apple, pear, cherry. Oh, it was so boring. Over and over and over and over again. Like, think 20 times in like the space of a couple of weeks. It was so boring. But even though in terms of a teacher, I didn't find it challenging enough, it did mean that because I was brand new to teaching ESL online, I could become very confident teaching this lesson. I knew what was coming on every single slide before I turned the page. So I was able to prepare. I knew how to extend the slides. If a student found Apple really easy, I knew what I could do on that slide to extend the lesson materials for that student and challenge them. I was also able to spend time creating props and rewards focused around the materials as well, to make the lesson more stimulating and interesting for the student too. So even though it was really boring and repetitive, teaching the same lesson over and over and over again for those first few weeks, there were benefits to that. So that's just something that I learned that hopefully you can take on board with your career getting started as well. Now, as we said at the beginning, I did see students from literally a baby up to 15 in these trial classes. Luckily, not my long-term students were babies. But in the trial classes, I literally had families turn up with a baby. So the lesson here is to expect everything. You'll see it all in these classes. I was teaching children that were sleeping. They were literally asleep in the lesson. Teaching children who were doing homework. They weren't even paying attention to the class. They were just doing their homework. Children who cried the whole 25 minutes. They were out in restaurants eating and couldn't hear a word I was saying. They were running around in the house. They were on the toilet. I've seen it all, I promise you. There were all these different circumstances in the trial classes. So trial classes they're great because it's repetitive. So you can get to know the materials inside out, you can feel more comfortable. But they also kind of dump you in the deep end a little bit because you're not seeing the same students to build a rapport with. You could have anybody turn up in these classes at different ages. And when you're teaching kids, obviously kids, they've had a really long day at school perhaps, they've come home, they've still got homework to do, they've got all this energy built up from the day. So it is really difficult for them to spend 25 minutes sat still listening to a foreigner try to teach them new words in a different language that they haven't heard of before. So it's completely understandable that you'll have different experiences, especially if you look very different to what they have normally seen. Some countries around the world are not very diverse. So it could be the first time that they've seen a white person, a black person, an Asian person, an Indian person. These children can be quite shocked when they first get on the camera with you, and that's okay. So share your warmth, share your encouragement, your enthusiasm in a nice, calm and peaceful and positive manner to help settle them into class. But don't worry if they start crying, if they don't want to come on camera, if they're worried or afraid. Those are normal, and that's where we can incorporate games and props and teddies and things to get down to their level and connect with those students. Also, just a personal note, we mentioned about how we've seen students in all kind of environments. If a student does go to the bathroom, remember to turn their camera off and their microphone off to give them some privacy, because children don't always understand those boundaries, and we obviously want to protect their privacy. So make sure that you do that in class, and you can just put a note and you can say in the microphone, okay, when you've finished, and when you're finished in the bathroom, come out, you can put your camera and your microphone back on, and things like that. And you can leave a message, and you can use a translator to leave a message in their language as well on the screen so that they understand too. Okay, moving on. When it comes to your lessons, 25 minutes, 50 minutes sounds like a really long time when you're in an environment that's brand new to you. But actually, when you are teaching for those 25 minutes or those 50 minutes, the time goes extremely quickly. Before you know it, those 25 minutes are up and you've only got through a couple of pages of the material. So that's something to note. If there's a timer in the class, utilize that. If there isn't, use a timer on your phone or get a timer available to you that you can keep an eye on for the countdown so that you are managing your time. So you've got time at the end of the class to review the materials, to summarize the lesson, to have a quick fun activity with your students, build those rapports, and to say goodbye. Because what you don't want to do is go over time and then be late for your next session. And trust me, I've done that quite a few times. I'm a bit of a talker and I like my students to talk a lot and have fun in their lesson. So we have gone over quite often in our classes, and we don't want to then set up a bad experience for our next student. We value their time as well, so we want to be on time for them. Now, when it comes to bookings, a top tip that I found worked for me is that the first regular classes that I was booked were those that I offered for peak hours. So peak hours with the company that you're working with are the hours that most students want to book. So when we were teaching students in China, that would be after their school time, so 6 till 9 p.m. Beijing time at night, and also during the day at the weekend, so most time all weekend. Those are the peak hours. So my first bookings when I worked with the Chinese company were actually the peak times over the weekend. Those were my regular slots that got filled up very, very quickly. When it came to the weekday classes, I did fill up, but they would take a little bit longer than those on the weekends. I did notice, however, is once I did start getting some regular students, I was then receiving some feedback. And when I gained some positive reviews, I then saw a correlation in my bookings going up. The company then saw, oh yes, she's a good teacher, let's offer her some more classes, see how she gets on with those. Then again, more positive feedback, my bookings then increased and my schedule filled up pretty quickly from that point. So from the point of trial classes to a first couple of students that were regular, it did take a bit of time. But then from those first few regular students, because I gained positive feedback, it then the company put trust in me as a good teacher, and my schedule filled up really quickly. A few things I want to just talk about, some lessons that I learned along the way that hopefully will help you when it comes to starting with your first online ESL job. Number one, we just talked about peak times are the best and most easiest to fill up. If you can offer peak hours with your company, then I recommend doing that first, because it's going to be easier for the company to fill out your schedule if your availability fits their students' demands. So try and offer peak times whenever you can. Make sure that you are including everybody who's watching in your lesson. Now, even though your lesson might be for a 6-year-old student, it's often that their parents are sat by the side of them, slightly off camera, or you have somebody in the background, or grandma comes along to see what's going on just on camera. Include everybody. I know it can feel a bit daunting. You're trying to teach a 6-year-old and there's other adults going on in the background. It's actually really fun and they really appreciate it when you include them. So if I've got mum or dad sat next to the child, when we come into class, I greet the student first because that's who I'm obviously going to communicate with for the majority of the lesson. But I also say hi to mum or hi to dad. If grandma comes along in the class, I'll ask the student, oh, who's that? Who's this? And they'll tell me and I'll go, oh, hi. And even better if you know their local language, because it's highly likely that grandma or grandpa might not know English. Then if you do know a few local phrases from their native tongue, then it would be wonderful and great manners if you greet them and say hello in their language too. So make sure you include everybody who's watching. Obviously, your priority is your student and you want to spend the majority, 95% of the time on your student, but make sure to include and thank at the end of the class especially. This went down really well when I was teaching kids, to thank mum or dad for their time in helping their child in the lesson as well. Their role is not to compete against you as a teacher, it's not to contradict you as a teacher, although that does sometimes happen. The role when they're sat in class is to support you as a teacher. Make sure that their child is engaging in the lesson, they're behaving appropriately, and they are there to help you. Sometimes it doesn't work that way, but we'll talk about that in a different session. Next, learn a little bit about what's considered polite or rude in your students' culture. So when I was teaching children from China, pointing at the camera like this is actually very rude. If you're pointing at someone, it's very, very rude. So obviously, a lot of the time when we're teaching children, we're saying, oh, what's this? What's that? What's this? We don't want to point at you. So things like, how are you? That would be considered very, very rude. So it was important that I spent some time learning about the culture, making sure that I wasn't accidentally being very rude on camera to those families, because that could lead to a cancellation and they don't want to learn with me any longer. So it doesn't take much effort from you, it doesn't take much time, but do go out and find out about the culture of the students that you're teaching, making sure that you are being polite on camera to them. For example, with the pointing, instead I would use my hands. So I go, how are you? Rather than pointing like this, how are you? Okay, so there are things that we can do to adapt our teaching style, and it goes a long, long way showing respect to our students and their families. Next is a big mistake that I made early on, is talking far too much in the lesson and quite quickly as well. When someone's learning a language, we actually need to slow down our own speaking pace, making sure that they can follow along, they can understand everything that we are communicating with them, and giving them time rather than filling awkward silences, making sure there are silences in class that they can feel practicing the language themselves. It's no good us talking for the whole lesson. We're not teaching them anything that way, other than to be quiet and listen to us. So probably not then feeling comfortable and confident to actually speak up, because we are filling out the whole lesson with our own voice. So it's important to have those gaps, to slow down and to be patient, to allow them the safe space in order to try their best and communicate in English. And alongside that, utilize TPR, total physical response. This is when we're using our hands and gestures alongside our words to demonstrate what something means. And I have talked about this before, but if I was talking about having a drink, for example, I might pretend that I'm holding a cup and I would put that pretend cup to my mouth. Drink, glug, 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 glug. So I'm adding the sound effects, I'm using the word, and I'm also showing with a visual what that means. And that helps the students associate the word with an action, a sound, and put all of that together to comprehend what it is that we are talking about or what that we are asking them for. Next is to have a range of props available. This was so important, especially when we talked about some students are eating, some students are distracted, they're running around, they're not paying attention in class, they're doing their homework. If I have ways to engage their attention and lead them into the lesson, that will then increase the likelihood that I will maintain their attention throughout the whole class. So at the beginning of the lesson, sometimes I wouldn't even be on camera. I'd have a teddy pretending to be me in the class. That immediately brings the student's attention. Maybe not for a teenager, but for the really young students, that immediately grabs their attention, like, oh, there's a toy on the camera. What's this? That's so cute. So it brings them into the lesson, and then I can softly and gently have the teddy introduce me as their teacher. Alongside this, in terms of retaining their attention, make sure that you have a range of backup activities. Remember when we talked about the trial class, apple, cherry? Some of my students already know those words, so that wouldn't have helped them if I was just teaching the same word again. I would have lost their interest immediately. So having some backup activities that will be easy to adapt no matter the lesson material is really helpful. So a couple of games, for example, would be really good. Or maybe you could have some yes or no questions, or which would you choose, this or that kind of situation. And then you can adapt that with the lesson materials. So cherry or apple, which would you choose? Describe an apple, or do a drawing game and they have to guess what it is. Things like that will help them practice what they already know, but also take it to the next level. So we're making that topic a bit more challenging for them, but not too challenging that will disengage them again. And it retains their interest in the classroom because they're having fun whilst they're learning at the same time. So I hope my own personal experience has been a bit helpful to you, a bit more reassuring as you go forward with your first few classes with your online ESL company. Congratulations on being hired. And I know it is a bit scary to start with. You're going to be in front of the camera, teaching some students that you've never met before, a new topic that perhaps you've never taught online English before as well. It does feel a little bit nerve-wracking. It's okay to feel a bit afraid, but your confidence will grow the more classes that you will teach, and you will start to see this enjoyment of teaching and helping other people from all around the world learn English as well. It's such a wonderful way to connect with other people of different ages, from different backgrounds and cultures, and help them improve their skills within a particular field. We're talking English, but it could be in anything. Well done for taking the first step in your career. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel because I post videos like this every single week to help you understand the industry of teaching ESL online better and find more work and improve your skill sets along the way. I'll see you soon, friends.